if I was to be a little poetic about it, we would say karma, memory and desire is recycling as your body, this moment. So this was not an idea that Western scientists or biologists are very, very keen on jumping onto. It sounds too metaphysical, it sounds too philosophical, it sounds too esoteric, and all of Western biology is based on what is called reductionism. Reductionism means you look at different parts of the body, then you examine different parts, and then you bring it down to very specifics. You start with organs, then you look at tissues, then you look at molecules, then you look at atoms, and you go down to the smallest level. That's the way we do science. And that's called reductionism. And so when we apply this reductionist method to human biology and disease, then what we try to understand is mechanisms of illness. How does pneumonia occur? Well, your immune system is weak, and there are lots of bacteria, and they multiply, and that causes the infection. So how do we treat it? We create an antibiotic that interferes with the reproduction of these bacteria, and we can get rid of the infection. How do we treat cancer? We look at how cancer cells replicate. You interfere with that with chemotherapy or radiation, and hopefully you get rid of cancer. On and on. You know, how do ulcers form? It's usually an infection, too much hydrochloric acid, you block that, etc. So this is what is called the reductionist method, which is the way we do medicine. Now there are two problems with that method. One is the theoretical problem, which is that mechanisms of disease are not the origins of disease. Okay, you can, as I said, two people have the same illness, they see the same physician, they get the same treatment, but they get different outcomes. Which is also true that two people are exposed to the same infection, same pneumonia, the pneumococcus, but they don't all get pneumonia. Or 100 people are exposed to a carcinogen, they don't all get cancer. So what's going on? The first thing to recognize is that mechanisms of illness are not the origins of illness. The origins of illness may go deeper into how we live our life. So that's one thing. The second thing is that with this reductionist method, we end up with a lot of secondary illness. Today, the number one cause of infections is actually antibiotic-resistant infections, which are found mostly in hospitals, because the organisms are resistant to antibiotics, having been exposed to them. Today, it's also known that the number one cause of drug addiction in the world is medical prescriptions prescribed by doctors. We also know that as we treat cancer with chemotherapy and radiation, although we are successful only a few times, not most of the time, we create havoc with the immune system, and there are new types of cancers, new infections coming out, and every single intervention has some side effect or not. And also we know that even some of the big interventions like bypass surgery, it helps only 2% of people with stable angina, and yet, you know, this is a big industry right now, or angioplasty. So this was the problem. Reductionism is, there's something going on that even as we treat illness, we sow the seeds of illness in the future. This and also as we get rid of old epidemics, and then new epidemics come. So in much of the world, tuberculosis, malaria, smallpox, polio doesn't exist anymore in much of the world, but they have different epidemics: heart disease, drug addictions, cardiovascular accidents, epidemics of cancer. In fact, the age-adjusted mortality of cancer, which is the number of people who die of cancer at a particular age has not changed in the last 30 years in the entire world, despite billions, hundreds of billions of dollars spent into research on cancer. So something's wrong with the model. And the model is that we are looking at the human body too mechanistically. We are not looking at the human body in its totality. You are more than a physical body. You have a mind, you have an intellect, you have an ego, you probably have a soul, a spirit. So all of that is being ignored when we're just looking at the physical body. We are not a physical machine that has learned to think. And so we needed another model. And what I'm proposing to you, which is becoming a movement right now in the entire world, is that if we really want to understand well-being, we have to go beyond the mechanisms of illness. We have to understand the origins of disease, but we also have to understand the origin of health and well-being. Health is not just the absence of a disease. Health is to experience an energetic, joyful body. Health is to experience healthy emotions like love, compassion, joy, equanimity. Health is to experience a quiet, alert, reflective mind. And health is also to experience lightness of being, or flow, as they say. So this is the basis of what we call holistic well-being. In fact, the word holistic is a very good word, because holistic is in fact the origin of the word. Health, holy, wholeness, they're all the same word. To be healthy is to remember who you really are and to return to the memory of wholeness. Now, a few more things about the human body, just so I give you the latest information. The human body has about 600 trillion cells, which is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. What is interesting about the human body is that only 6 trillion of these, which is 10% of the cells in your body, are human cells. So what are the rest? What are the 90% of the cells in your body? The rest are bacteria. Okay, so this is pretty recent, and even though the bacterial DNA in your body is only about 3% of the total mass of your body, it is 90% of your DNA. And these bacteria live in your skin, they live in your nasal cavity, in your oral cavity, ear canals, in your stomach, in your gut, in your rectum, in your large intestine, everywhere. And these bacterial colonies together are referred to these days as the microbiome. Microbiome, that's the part of your biology that is bacterial. And as I said, it's 90% of your genetic information. These bacteria produce metabolites, and 30% of the molecules in your blood are derived from the metabolites of the microbiome. And these molecules help the microbiome in your body communicate with human DNA. So human DNA, which is about 10% of your body, and the microbial DNA, which is 90% of your body, they're cross-talking to each other with only one purpose: to keep you healthy. Okay, to keep you in balance, to keep you in a vital state. So what does the microbiome respond to? It responds to how you sleep. If you didn't sleep well last night, your microbiome gets upset. And when it gets upset, it gets inflamed. And when it gets inflamed, it creates molecules that talk to the human DNA, and that gets inflamed, and ultimately your body gets a background of inflammation, and that leads to people getting sick, whether they get autoimmune illnesses, or heart disease, or cancer, or strokes, or any illness, there's a background of inflammation. So inflammation is a result of inflammation in the bacteria of your body. If you use too many antibiotics, the bacteria will get inflamed because they're being killed, right? If you eat food that has a lot of chemicals, GMO food, which is genetically modified food, or which has preservatives and insecticides and pesticides, pesticides, processed, manufactured, refined food, or artificial sweeteners, the manufacturing process itself introduces inflammation, because the manufacturing process involves petroleum products. So you put that in your body, your microbiome will get inflamed, your human DNA will get inflamed, your body will get inflamed, and you are susceptible to sickness. So food, what you put in your body, sleep. If you're stressed, if you're angry, you're upset, you're feeling hostility, that's an inflammatory emotion. That will inflame the microbiome, and then the rest of your body will get inflamed. Anger, stress, hostility, fear, resentment, grievances, depression will inflame the microbiome. If you don't move enough, your body gets stagnant, it will get inflamed as well. So sleep, movement, meditation, exercise, yoga, pranayam techniques, massage, the state of hydration in the body will all affect the microbiome and therefore the balance in your body. So this was very interesting to us theoretically. And about 2 years ago, I met with a scientist at the University of California who is a Nobel laureate. Her name is Elizabeth Blackburn, and she's known for having discovered an enzyme called telomerase. Telomerase is the enzyme that controls the length of your chromosomes. So as we grow older, the chromosome starts to get shorter, and when it finally gets to a certain length, it frays and it falls apart. That's the basis, cellular basis of death, physical death. And she won the Nobel Prize for discovering the enzyme. So I went to her, and we have a course in our center where people come for 1 week of very intense meditation. So not only do they learn yoga and pranayama, but they go through the practice of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Dhyan, Dharana, Samadhi. So Dhyan is meditation, Dharana is focused intention, and then Samadhi is transcendence, going beyond the thought process to experience a thoughtless state. And so we have this week of very intense meditation, and also elements of Vipassana introduced. And so I asked Elizabeth's team to come and look at our attendees and look at their blood samples. And within 4 days of people going through our program, the level of the enzyme telomerase, which is basically influencing how your cells age, went up by 40%. It was shocking to all of us. You know, we thought that something we had discovered which had never been seen before. And in fact, if you read the great scriptures of India, they say the rishis and the munis used to live for a long time. They didn't age the way we age today in our society, etc., etc. Well, now we had a kind of molecular proof of what might be happening in these people. Fortunately, we had saved the samples, and what we did is we sent them to several institutions: Harvard, Duke University, UCSF, of course, our own medical school where I teach, UCSD in California and San Diego, and we looked at the entire genome. So all the 23,000 genes that make up your body, and we looked at almost 100,000 proteins that are produced by these genes. And that study is not published yet, but it will soon be published, and it will make headlines all over the world, because we found that in 4 days of meditation, Dhyan Dharana Samadhi, the entire genome changes. Genes which cause healing and self-regulation go up, and genes which cause inflammation go down. And so genes involved in diseases like heart disease, many types of cancer, autoimmune diseases, bronchial asthma, you name it, they go down in their activity, and genes that cause self-regulation or healing go up. Okay, so this has now, this whole new area of science is called epigenetics. You're born with a certain set of genes, but it's not, genes are not your destiny. You can switch on genes that are good for you, and you can switch off genes that are bad for you. So it's not the gene itself, but which gene is active and which gene is inactive. Of course, DNA is a letter. You think of genes like the word of a language. DNA is the letter of life. You know, there are 4 letters of life, and then a stretch of DNA that codes for a protein is called a gene. Your body is made up of these proteins, the basic elements of your body, and then, of course, your body's the language of the words that the genes spell out. Okay, so this is the basis of what is emerging as a new science called epigenetics. The 3 things that are really now on the level of breakthroughs, one is epigenetics, which means your genes are not your destiny. The second is the microbiome. How do we influence the microbiome? We were now started to look at all the oils and the herbs of Ayurveda, like ashwagandha and shatavari, and even haldi and turmeric, and things like methi, and all the herbs that we have in the Ayurvedic formulary, and looking at their effects both on the microbiome and also gene expression. So epigenetics, microbiome, but the third area is neuroplasticity. So that was the reason that I ended up writing a book with a Harvard neuroscientist called Superbrain, which is your brain can be rewired based on how you think, how you feel, how you speak, how you behave, how you eat, how your personal relationships. So everything that we call life, basically. Every day we eat, we breathe, we digest, we metabolize, we eliminate, we experience the world through our 5 senses, and we engage in relationships and social interactions. The point is, these are the elements that you can use to rewire your brain, to activate the genes that are optimal for good health, and improve the crosstalk between the microbiome and the human cells. Your body is an ecological colony, and this ecological colony is the ecology of the total earth, and it has in it every expression of life since life began 2.8 billion years ago on our planet. Your body has the history of life on our planet. It has the history of your ancestors. It has the history of our animal ancestors. It has the history of the microbes. This is the way to think of your body. So, in 3 months ago, we had invited Thich Nhat Hanh to my studio in New York, where we have a studio. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk, who's a Buddhist, and he's also a calligrapher, and he was doing a calligraphy meditation. So he was drawing a circle, and he said, I invite my mother to draw this circle with me. And he said, I invite my father to draw this circle with me. And then he invited all of us in the audience. He says, why don't you invite your mother and your father to draw the circle with you? Then he said, let's invite our ancestors. And it suddenly occurred to me that he wasn't speaking metaphorically. The genetic activity in every cell of your body is all your ancestors in your body at this moment. every ancestor in your body is alive. This moment has your genetic activity. So this has taken us to a whole different level of thinking. What I thought was, since our great traditions, the tradition of Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism and Shankaracharya and all the great Advaita teachers have spoken as the highest state of well-being as enlightenment, I thought I'd show you what we are doing in our work now on looking at the brain for higher states of consciousness. Okay, so normally in everyday existence we talk about 3 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming and sleeping. But if you look at the wisdom tradition of India, there's a 4th state of consciousness called Turiya, which is the experience of your soul. There's a 5th state of consciousness called Turiya Tata, which is cosmic consciousness. There's divine consciousness. And these are states of consciousness that are very practical. It's not like you just read about them and some rishi like Vashishta or Bhrigu experienced them. Of course they did, but they did leave a record, like Patanjali, on how to achieve these states of consciousness. So now what we're doing is we're mapping the brain in states of consciousness. The frontal lobe of your brain is where you